Oh, I would say piano. We had a piano in the house. My dad played, so he was always down there. So I think, yeah, that was it. I mean, technically, there was probably, he had bongos and a guitar too, but piano was the easiest one to get going. Yeah, well, my initial lessons, I wanted to play, and I asked my mom. I was about 11 or 12, and I asked for lessons, piano lessons. So that was the beginning, and it was sort of just traditional, normal, middle American piano lessons, and I did that for a year or two, but really quickly got into kind of playing basically things that my dad was playing, which was like blues and jazz, his rendition, and he played by ear. So I always had that reference. And he showed me a couple things too. So right away I was already kind of improvising and figuring out my own things to play. So that quickly developed for me that I didn't need like sheet music to play things. I could figure them out by ear if I wanted, and I could make up things on my own if I wanted. So I pretty quickly got into playing jazz effectively, you know, or what I was trying to play jazz anyway. Yeah, it was sort. My dad was really into Horace Silver, so it was Six Pieces of Silver. That album. That was Horace Silver was the first thing I heard that I really kind of recognized, and it was because my dad was into it, and he played those Senior Blues and those kind of tunes. And I used to listen to that all the time. And also the trio one was Sabu, Conga Sat with Art Blakey. Those two Horace Silver albums were kind of early references for me. And then quickly things around that sort of developed. But I know that was just something that was always played, so I started just playing it over and over and listening to that. Yeah, that's the thing, and the rhythm was I think that's always stayed with me. Because I mean, he was, just that, a sense of phrasing around rhythm. Yeah, I'm sure that was always impactful. That kind of thing, and like the ostinato thing, he was doing that with that. I mean, so was Bud and a lot of people, but Horace had that real rhythmic approach to that. Yeah. Well, when I was applying to colleges, I knew, growing up in Minneapolis, I just knew I wanted to move away from there, not out of any sense of derision for Minneapolis, but more just because I wanted to go somewhere else. So my only criteria were I wanted a sort of a big school, and I wanted to be near a urban center that had like a jazz community. That's the two things I knew. So I didn't really plan. I mean, I was looking at a number of different schools, but University of Michigan seemed to fit the bill, being near enough to Detroit, but being a big school, because I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know that I was going to go into music. I thought I might, but I wanted other options. I wanted a school big enough that had enough resources so I could explore, a little bit and see what I might be into majoring in. And University of Michigan had a composer history too, and history of like American experimental music. Gordon Muma and Robert Ashley and those kind of people were there in the early '60s. So I knew that, and then I knew Detroit, of course. So I thought that was a good place to go, and it turned out that it was for me, for the jazz thing specifically. Because right away when I got there, I met Gerald Cleaver, drummer, and trying out for jazz combo classes. And it was through him that I started doing gigs in Detroit. And like my first gig in Detroit was with James Carter, Rodney Whitaker, and Gerald was playing drums. So yeah, it was Detroit. At that time, they were all still there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that all, just around that time in Detroit, there weren't that many pianists. I mean, there were some guys, like Carlos McKinney was a few years younger, so there were guys who couldn't play in clubs yet. I was 18 and he was like 15, 16, so, there were a lot of gigs to play, and there were a lot of people that, like at that time, there was Marcus and Wendell Harrison, and so there were a lot of people. I mean, there still are, but there were a lot of people in Detroit to play with, and there were a lot of young musicians to play with. Rodney and James Carter, Gerald, J.D. Allen was still in high school, like Ollie Jackson, Kareem Riggins. All these guys were. It was rich with music, like with jazz talent, really rich with jazz talent. So it was a really good scene to be playing. Yeah, but Marcus was really, yeah, just those kind of figures were always really helpful and encouraging in Detroit. You call you for gigs, and it was very inclusive. You know, it wasn't an exclusive scene; it was an inclusive scene as far as everything. What kind of music people played? Everybody had a broad vision of what the music was and how to perform it, and they had a real sense of nurturing young talent and giving people a chance to play, so they call you for gigs. Yeah. I think my first paid gig, my real gig was probably playing with this singer, and I don't remember her name, and it was like a lounge gig in Minneapolis. Is that the first? It was that. It was around that time. There was that. I do not remember her name, and I feel bad about that. And then I did a solo piano lounge gig that my piano teacher at the time hooked me up with, and it was. Those kind of gigs are really informative. You play a lot of tunes, and there's a lot of room to really deal with just fundamental kind of stuff that you would want to deal with on the piano and get paid for it. Like you're just going through the tunes, so you do things, like I would do things like, you know, play it in a different key each night or something. You know, just all that stuff that you're supposed to practice, and I was like, oh, I can actually kind of practice on the job, you know, and really try things. And you're doing it, you know, nightly, or like 2 nights a week for a year or something, you know. It's better than a paper route, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. How much better? Do you remember how much you got paid?
I don't. It wasn't that much. Like in hindsight. I really don't. I can't remember. 25, I don't remember. I have no recollection of the money. Yeah. Craig.